Hi, everybody. Andrew Champagne here alongside J.D. Fox for this week's edition of Champagne and J.D. We're really excited for this week's episode, J.D. especially because he's got a fellow Sac State guy on the show. We are joined by a guy you know from TVG, from the Best Damn Sports Show, period, from a bunch of different places, including his podcast on the Believe Network. He's been in a bunch of movies. The guy's done pretty much everything, and we're really happy to have him on the show. Ken Rudulph. Ken, welcome to the show, man.
Stingers up, baby.
Stingers up.
What's up? How you guys doing? You guys all right?
I'm outnumbered.
That's right.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be a good show. We're looking forward to the show. We're going to touch a lot of ground on a lot of different things that are going on in racing right now. But before we go further, it's going to be a very, very good card on Saturday at Belmont Park, anchored by the Met Mile, one of the races that's been labeled a stallion-making race. And JD, Ken, there are Grade 1 races and there are Grade 1 races. This one is the latter. It's a field of 8, and it's got some of the top older horses in training. We've got McKinsey, we've got Vekoma, we've got Code of Honor, a number of very classy graded stakes winners that are going to be big prices. JD, it's a good race. It's a big day of racing at Belmont, 11 races. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, and really the interesting part is it is leg 2 of the all-stakes pick 4 that we have going on Saturday. But very interesting to see various form cycles. You know, very interesting to see the pace scenario. Obviously, one of the things that's very interesting to me is Warrior's Charge, who I think might be the fastest horse in the race, drawn all the way outside. Will that affect McKenzie and what they want to do there? One of the things that I'm looking for. And another thing, too, is Hall Creek Hustle's been one of my favorite horses for a long time. Mile might be pushing it. This is a 7 furlong horse, but really excited for Vicky Foley to get a chance. And I was shocked to hear, and maybe we go through this every couple of years, that a female trainer's never won the Met Mile. So obviously sentimental choice for me with Hog Creek Hustle. Ken?
Well, I mean, he's right about starting with Warrior's Charge to the outside. That's obvious controlling speed, but the horse that I think really, really loves to go a mile no matter what track, no matter what configuration, is Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is a perfect horse that can sit the trip. He can be close. If they want to go slow, if they go too fast, he can drop off and make that move and run them down at a mile. I think Mr. Freeze is very interesting, but that's not who I like. That's not who I like.
Who do you like, Ken?
You know, it's a jockey that I don't think – I've only cashed on him like one time in any significant race, and it was last year. And a trainer that I don't think I've ever cashed on until I cashed on him via disqualification. So I'm going to go with Endorsed. I finally hit a ticket with Joel Rosario aboard Sir Winston in the Belmont Stakes last year. And I finally hit a ticket with Bill Mott, the Hall of Famer, when I had Country House, who got put up via disqualification in the Derby. So I'll put them both together to run everybody down from off the pace with Endorsed in the Met Mile. Hopefully he'll be some value.
Here you're seeing the field for the Run Happy Met Mile, race number 9. It's an 8-horse field, as we've mentioned. And you mentioned Endorsed, formerly a Kieran McLaughlin trainee, going to the barn of Bill Mott. You also mentioned Mr. Freeze, Ken, and I'm very happy you did. Mind you, McKinsey's probably going to go favored, and for good reason. This is a horse that's won Grade 1 races at ages 2, 3, 4, and 5. Classy horse, a horse that we've got to see develop over the last couple of years. Probably the best horse in this race, and if McKinsey runs his race, he probably wins. But if you're looking for some value, I think the play here may very well be a page out of your TVG colleague Dave Weaver's book, An Ice Cold Exacta, with McKinsey and Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze has not done a lot wrong this year. He was second in the Pegasus World Cup, came right back, won a Grade 3, was third in the Oaklawn Handicap, and I didn't think got a great trip that day. Mr. Freeze has a lot of tactical speed, and they rated the horse back behind By My Standards, who came back and ran a good second in the Clark last weekend behind arguably the best older horse in the country, Tom's d'Etat. I think this is the trip Mr. Freeze wants. I think he's going to be on or near a controlled, manageable pace, and I think he's got a big shot to be right there at a pretty big price. He's probably going to be the 4th choice in this field, and if that horse is 8, 10 to 1, maybe you can use that horse on the back end of your exotics and get a little bit of value out of McKinsey, even though McKinsey's going to be a pretty short price. JD, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, and we talked about this before, like, I still go back to the ACAC last year. I think that was Mr. Freeze's most impressive performance, and I really see a trip similar to that race setting up for him here. So really, I do like Mr. Freeze's value. I do agree. I think McKenzie's the best horse in the race, but given everything that we've seen this year, I don't necessarily feel like every horse is on a level playing field in terms of condition where they thought they were going to be at this time of the year. I think Mr. Freeze is been very lightly raced, but that Oaklawn handicap didn't get a great trip. Good work, Tab. I'm excited for Mr. Freeze and probably backing Mr. Freeze when it comes time to it on Saturday.
Now, how do you guys approach courses coming off layoffs? Because like Mr. Freeze hasn't run since March, but yet like a horse like Endorsed has had a couple of races off the layoff and is coming into form. And so we're coming out of this whole pandemic where horses had to shut down for a while. How do you guys evaluate horses that had to shut down and now they're coming back off a layoff?
That's a darn good question. And for me, it's a matter of trainer perspective. There are some trainers that can get horses ready to fire off of breaks of 2-3 months. There are some instances where trainers will take a start to get a horse going. And that's what we saw with Code of Honor last time out in the Westchester. He came back, was pretty professional that day, wound up winning by a half length. And Ken, you like Endorsed. Endorsed was beaten less than a length by a horse that's won 2 Grade 1. So that's a feather in Endorsed cap there. The question is, will Code of Honor be more fully cranked this time out? Or is it a case where maybe they're betting the second time improvement? That improvement never comes and he's an underlay. It's an intriguing look at things. And we haven't mentioned Vekoma yet. Vekoma coming in off of that win in the Carter. He came in off a little bit of a layoff and won a Grade 1. He runs sort of weird. It's not exactly textbook action. But when Vekoma gets going, he's as fast as any. And JD and I were talking before we got on this show, before we hit the record button, just once, I would love to see Vekoma try turf. That's turf pedigree up, turf pedigree on the bottom. However, if they've got a Grade 1 type horse on dirt, chances are they're not overly concerned about trying the grass anytime soon.
Ken, to answer your question, I think the best way I look at it is when you got a trainer like Dale Romans and Mr. Freeze. I like that drill a week out, 6 days out, to just make sure the horse is sharp. And the key with that is he took Mr. Freeze out on Monday in what was a very sloppy sealed racetrack at Churchill Downs, but felt the horse needed to work, so he ran him. I like that going into that situation where he hasn't run since May 2nd. It's been a long time. There's consistency to the work path, and there's that little just quick maintenance work right before the race. I'm a big fan of that angle myself.
All right. Oh, that's solid. You know, it's one of those things I often ask other players if they're like me. I make the mistake of I hold grudges. Like if a horse, if I bet you recently, and you did not come through for me, I'm not betting you again the next time. I'm like mad at you. And so there are certain horses in this field where I'm like, man, like McKenzie's the kind of horse where I'm like, man, I've needed you sometimes and you didn't come through. I don't know. I can't really go for you again. And like there are other horses like Hog Creek Hustle I had in a couple of races, and I'm like, man, come on, I'm not messing with you. And Code of Honor, I didn't have him, and they put him up via disqualification when I had Vino Ralston. I'm like, man, forget that. I'm not betting that horse. Do you guys hold grudges at all?
I do. I have a never again list for sure. And a lot of that is horses that are lifetime maidens that just keep getting bet over and over and over. And you look and you give them one shot. Say it's a maiden special weight dropping into a maiden claimer. That horse hangs again, it makes the list. And a horse that I think is on a lot of people's never again list is actually running on Saturday in the Suburban at Belmont Park. I'm referring to Tacitus, the embodiment of a horse that just seems to find trouble no matter what. That horse could find trouble in a one-horse race, I think, Ken.
Oh, my gosh. You're not alone on that list. I'll bet you JD probably hates that horse, too.
Well, but here's the thing is I think we're in the very small percentage of players that feel that way, Ken, because I think Tacitus is going to get bet like a sure thing in that field. And I will say in that Suburban, if Tacitus is going to win a race, this might be the race. But what I always say about Tacitus is that the horse has never won a race outside of Aqueduct and Tampa Bay Downs, and he hasn't run over those courses in quite some time. So, yeah, it's 14 months since the last win, and just a whole bunch of seconds and just poor trips. I'm off of that horse. If it costs me the pick 4, I don't really care. I would rather not cash a ticket than cash a ticket with that kind of chalk on the end that I don't trust.
Exactly. Were you guys watching the show today on TVG? That very thing happened in the second leg of the pick 5 at like Indiana Grand, and I'm on with Christina Blacker, and we both decide to go for this 0 for 13 maiden who just breaks like a sponge, like doesn't even run out of the gate, and then finally starts getting going, and then ends up being like second. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. If you ever see me, it's like our Storm and Fever or something like that. I'm like, if you ever see me bet that horse again, slap me in the back of the head.
We'll get the intervention banner from How I Met Your Mother ready to go, and we'll send it your way.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Horses.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And there's a couple of horses like that with me. I was at Saratoga when Quality Road got nailed by Blame on the wire in the Whitney. And that was the one race where Todd Pletcher showed any emotion at all whatsoever. He hurled the binocular straight down. And that's the least Todd thing that he's ever done. Right. And Quality Road made my never again list. Blame cost me a lot of money that day, but he got it back a couple months later in the Classic when he got his nose down in another photo finish that was unpopular for a lot of people. And I should probably stop before I start getting hate mail.
I know. Like, if you better not say, don't you say Zenyatta.
I'm not. I didn't say it. You did. I didn't say it.
That was a great race. Like, you know, it's easier to deal with now, but on that day, I mean, like, I threw furniture across the top of Churchill Downs. I was not pleased.
Yeah. We've got stories like that. JD's got stories like that from Australia, horses that nobody's ever heard of, that if you just throw, in a random assortment of words in a sentence, he winds up like having the lone tear come down his right eye.
There's shared pain that I think only myself and Candace Hare really experience often, and that's why it's fun going back and forth with her when the good races are going on in Australia, because we have horses that we've been backing for weeks, and we give them out, and then they don't run a lick, and it's like, we don't follow this stuff. We trust you guys to follow it for us. And it's like, trust me, this horse, like, the last 3 races has run great. Like, don't look at me. Like, there's a long list and too long of a list for this show, obviously, because we've got a lot to talk about, and we're glad Ken agreed to join us today. And we really want to get down to race and inclusion in horse racing, and kind of a topic that has been on the minds of a lot of people here, as Ken's video has glitched out, unfortunately, here. So I'm just.
What did I just do?
I don't know. This sometimes happens when, Andrew, you sometimes get this with, like, when you have PPs and multiple tabs open. Let's see if Ken comes back here. Okay,
there we go.
I just reset it.
Yep.
Magic.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, that happens every once in a while. It happened with me once when I was talking about the last leg of a pick 4 at Oaklawn. Fittingly, my analysis was that I didn't have a clue, and Gino Baccola burst out laughing as everything was happening because it was so fitting. Incidentally, by the way, JD, question for you. Do you remember? Did I hit that pick 4?
Yeah,
did I hit it?
You did.
Okay, just making sure. Just making sure your memory's sharp. Anyway, going back to our regularly scheduled programming, first of all, if you haven't listened to the podcast that Ken did last week, here's what we're going to do. At the conclusion of this thought, I'm going to pause for 2 or 3 seconds. You can pause this video, open a new tab, listen to his podcast, and come back. We're going to be here. We'll wait for you. Don't worry about it. Now, okay, welcome back. Now that you've listened to Ken's podcast, which I personally found riveting, thought-provoking, not an easy listen, but it was a conversation that a lot of things need to have in horse racing. And a lot of times the most productive conversations are the ones that aren't easy to have, and they're the conversations that a lot of people are ducking for a lot of different reasons. And Ken, first of all, I just want to say thank you for putting all of that out there. I can't imagine that was an easy thing to record. And thank you for sharing everything that you did. As I mentioned on Twitter, we're with you. We want to do what we can, and we want to have a dialogue that we can go back and forth on, that we can be as productive as possible. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for coming on. And I'm looking forward to this because I want to be the best ally that I can be for diversity for underrepresented groups in horse racing, especially the black community, which, as you mentioned, very underrepresented in a lot of levels of this sport.
Well, thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm a little different than everyone else. I kind of want to know why it's so hard to listen to. You know, I kind of want to know why, for anyone, it's hard to listen to, because it can't be anything that's surprising to you.
No.
I can give my personal example for this.
Yeah.
It's probably my own naivety growing up, because I grew up California Fair Circuit. I'm from Stockton. That was my home track. And what I saw when I went to the track, what I learned later on in life, was completely different than what I saw at tracks around the country. Right. It was families, it was Black, Latino. We've got a big Pacific Islander community in Stockton. Yep. It was everybody. It was inclusive. So I always thought growing up, and probably from a naive sense, that this was the case around the country at all these tracks, when I was too young to understand the difference. So, you know, learning where I am now and seeing that while I've had this position in the back of my head, it hasn't been in the front of my head, or most importantly, coming out of my mouth enough. I think that's what made it hard to listen from that standpoint. Okay. I hope that gives a little clarity, at least personally for me, on what I felt listening to it.
And I can expound a little bit on that too. It was a fact that it made me realize I'm not doing enough. It made me realize that I'm not calling things out enough as I should, because the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm realizing, wait a minute. I was in the press box at Saratoga for several years, fortunate to do a lot of really cool things. I remember looking around. Everybody looked exactly the same, and nobody was saying a thing. Meanwhile, I'll readily admit, in the late, I guess we're calling them the aughts, the decades, the 2000 to 2009, at that point, I was in college. At that point, I wasn't following racing quite as closely as I do now. I was doing other things. Hearing the story about the Confederate flag silks and doing the research on that, that horrified me. And hearing that somebody named a horse Mute Rudulph, hearing that got by a lot of preventative channels, hearing that the silks got by a lot of preventative channels. Hopefully that explains that from my standpoint too.
Are you guys allowed to swear on the show?
Yes.
Just say it's fucked up.
It is. It's fucked up.
That's what it was.
It's bullshit.
It's really fucked up. Like, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
Like, think about it for a second. You got a sport that's built with black people. And you have these people that are in this sport that are from the beginning are black jockeys, and that's fine. Okay, great. Now we're into 1999, 2000. You decide you're going to start a network. And the network's like, we want people from all these different walks of life. So we're going to get this one guy who represents black people. Great, that's fine. So then I didn't find out until after the fact that it was all a conspiracy by the connections, because they're mad at me, the only black guy on TV doing this, because I didn't like Confederate flag silks. So they're going to show me.
My goodness.
Gonna show me. They're going to be like, we're going to shut that boy up. We're going to name a horse after him, tell him to mute, and then we're going to put Confederate flag silks on it in his hometown. We're going to show him. And I'm just like, that's the environment that we're in. Like, that's crazy talk to me.
Yeah.
And that there would be anyone that would ever be like, well, it was an accident. There were people that were telling me, well, that was an accident. I'm like, man, I didn't even say anything the whole time. I was like, this is so obvious. It's so obvious and so crazy that if you all don't fix it, there's no reason I can be here.
Yeah.
I mean, even though somebody went in there and they went to bat because they had no choice. They had to go take this thing to CHRB, and they got some slap on the wrist. And I'm like, I don't care. But it's like, what kind of sport are we in where the one person you're supposed to protect is not protected?
Yeah.
That was my whole thing. I'm like, there's only me at that time. There's nobody else to concern yourself with as far as that issue is concerned. As far as racial stereotyping and profiling and attacking somebody and trying to humiliate somebody with racial overtones only. I'm the only guy you got to protect, and you didn't even think about it. That's my kind of thing where I'm like, okay, well, we have to find ways. And I don't know if it's about, if you look in the press box and it's only white people, that's not your job. right? You can't go and change that. It kind of goes way above you and beyond you. But there are things that we can do, I think, just on an everyday basis. And like you mentioned, JD, when you go to the track, no matter where you go, it's everybody there, which is the reason why I even got into this, because I'm like, hey, that's like everybody's here. This is the place to be. Oh my God, this is so much fun. But yeah, my whole thing is that for whatever reason, I don't know what it is, but the powers that be decided to take over this sport years, decades, centuries ago, and they decided that their narrative was the most important narrative, even if that narrative went completely counter to history. And that's the thing. I'm like, well, we don't have to be that way. We're all here. Like, we don't have to be this way.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily on you guys to change that. You know what I mean?
I mean, at the same time, we do want to do our part to raise awareness of some of the work that's being done and some of the contributions that were made. I mean, you mentioned that the sport was built on black people, specifically on black jockeys who were some of the first stars of the game. The last African-American jockey to win the Kentucky Derby was Jimmy Winkfield in 1902. By my math, that's 118 years.
Yep.
You're telling me there hasn't been a really good black jockey that's been able to get, it's just, there's a lot going on there. And you're right in some senses that it's above our pay grade, in some cases about 9 miles. I mean, I am in a position where the only checks I take from the racing industry now are for my freelance work. My day job is in something else. JD, you're doing a lot outside your day job simply because you love the game. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to grow the game in as many ways as we can. And it's a case where now more than ever, I think we're realizing if everyone looks the same and everyone's thinking the same thing, at least one person isn't doing their job and at least one group probably isn't getting represented.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. I think what's also pretty dangerous in our industry is that in a lot of sports or industries, you have people that are, I don't want to say that they're blatantly racist, but they have a track record of saying or doing things. And you're like, hey, man, that doesn't sound right. So whether it's Donald Sterling in the NBA, where players have been complaining about him for 30 years. Think about that. Players are paid to play basketball for this man, and everybody who's out there who has their first instinct, we're like, well, they're being paid millions of dollars, they can deal with whatever. You're missing my point. My point has nothing to do with whatever those men are being paid. It's still humiliating to have a man who is the owner of the franchise who blatantly says and does things that are racist, and he still keeps his team for 30 years. Then when they take the team, he still gets $2 billion. Where's the fucking punishment? So if you're black, you're like, there's never a situation where you're going to win. Never. So you have to find a way to just carve out your little corner, or like I'm choosing to do, is stand up and be like, okay, that's cool. If you want to have it and be unfair like that, that's fine with me. What I don't want to do is have you tell me to shut up because I don't like that you make it unfair. That's what I'm not going to stand for anymore. Like I did that for 12 years, because I said something on air. Any owner of a horse who did not like me would call the network, and then I would be suspended for a day or two. I was pulled off the air. I don't know how many times, because I said something that may have offended an owner. And we all do that. That's our job. We're not trying to offend you, but we're talking about your horse. So you might not like that, but you're going to come and tell me they got to sit me down because you don't like what I said. It's all blatant, and it's all racist, and it's all to control. And so the whole thing we're doing now is we can't necessarily change that. I can't change the way that man feels. So I've decided I'm not going to try to change the way people feel. I think it's just important that I be able to sit here and look at you and say, I don't care. I get to be me, and I get to do my job. And if you don't like it, I don't care. You don't get to say, well, I don't like that black guy on the air. I think you need to give him a break. You don't get to do that anymore. That's all I care about. I'm not trying to put together scholarship funds or programs or affirmative action to get people hired. I don't care. I just think that we should be able to do our job I should be able to be here and not have to feel intimidated that I'm going to be removed because I'm not one of the good ones, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
This kind of, talking about the silks issue, and that kind of brought me to today, because there are still ownership groups out there that are putting silks together that are very offensive to certain groups of people. There is a certain ownership group in Texas. I'm going to walk around this, but once I say it, it's going to be who it is. But they've got American flag motif silks, and they just have the words Trump big on the front and the back of the silks. It's like, okay, you can make your political statement. You just have to be able to live with the fact that certain people are not going to like it, and people are going to feel the need to step out and say things about it, like I'm going to right now. It's, to me, I bet on a horse in a race, not knowing the silks. Saw the horse go around the finish line. It's like, well, yikes. Yeah. What did I just do? Even though that has no direct causal relationship with anything, none of my money went directly to that horseman, directly from my pocket. I mean, yeah, it went to part of my takeout went to a horseman's fund, which made fund the purse for the next time the horse runs. But, there's still little things like that I feel like seem like small potatoes, but I think they're big in the overall discussion that we're having.
Yeah, I mean, because it depends on how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think that's what we're talking about, is how individuals feel. There was an individual, his last name is Abbott, and he owned horses, and he runs his horses in Canada, at Woodbine. And it was 2017 where he got rid of his Confederate flag silks. And it wasn't really a big deal. No one really said anything about it. And I had to go do the research to find that out. And I was like, wait a minute, there was a guy in 2017 that was running with Confederate flag silks. And then I found out that there was another one just the other day at Louisiana Downs running with Confederate flag silks. And my friends told me there's another one at another track. And I'm like, that's all intentional, because there's no reason for you to do that now. You're only doing that. Okay, so flying the Confederate flag, or showing me that, is very much the same as putting MAGA on your Twitter handle, because you're only doing that to antagonize people on purpose. We all love our country. If you want to support the president, I'm totally fine with that. You're supposed to. He's the president. I didn't necessarily vote for the previous administrations, but when they're the president, I'm like, okay, all right, if you want to support that, that's totally fine. But then there are certain things people do that are just done just to antagonize. And, putting the Confederate flag on anything is done just to antagonize. That's all you're trying to do. You're not trying to show heritage or pride, because you know exactly what that's for. And that's what makes that so hurtful, is like, you're doing that on purpose. Like, that's not even remotely cool. And then the Trump thing, I don't remember seeing anybody in 8 years put Obama on silks to run in a race. Did you?
No, and you would think with Arlington, Fairmont, Hawthorne, Illinois.
You don't have any black people that own horses. Well, you have some, but they're not even remotely in the majority. So the only people that would feel like they would want to do that, right? Like, I'm not kidding. If I owned a horse, I would do something, but not like that, because I don't care enough about politics to do that. Like, I would never antagonize politically. I'd put my band's name on. I'd name my horse after bands or after songs that I've written, or that's what I would do. Like, that's just crazy that you would do something like that just to antagonize people. Like, that's the whole point.
Yeah, and the thing that gets me and pisses me off even further is you voiced that on your podcast, you voiced that on your Twitter handle, and there are people that are trying to tell you how to feel when that's not anything that they should even be remotely doing. This is a situation where if you don't know, listen. And that, I think, is something that society, we need a lot more of. We need a lot more people listening, and a lot more people realizing everyone's journey is different.
Precisely. And if you think about my particular journey and what I tried to relay to people in that episode, and by the way, I mean, that's the only time where I sat down and just talked myself. Every episode I have guests and I let them do the talking, but I just felt like I wanted to explain to people, because I'd been gone for so long. I was gone for 8 years. And I forgot that at least 3 or 4 waves of viewers came in that had no idea who I was and no idea what I had been a part of that first 12 years and no idea what I experienced. Therefore, they wouldn't have any idea that we've made zero progress.
Yeah,
And
they just saw you as the Giacomo guy. That's
precisely. And I'm okay with that because I love being that guy. Because, man, that's just what it's all about. Like I said, that's what it's all about. Every single one of you has a Giacomo story. I just happen to be the guy with the camera. You know what I'm saying? Like, you all had a story where you're like, that first time you're like, man, I love that 25-1. I love that 40-1. I love that 50-1 shot, man. I like that horse. And you all had a moment and you bet it and that freaking thing won. Everybody has a Giacomo. I just happened to have a camera on me when it happened. So I feel like, man, I love being that guy and sharing that feeling with people and saying that it can happen in any race at any time. You just got to, do your work and wait for that opportunity and it can come forward. But for the people who didn't know, like, what this sport was built upon and why it's such a huge void now when you see that history has been completely erased and it's not even acknowledged. And you don't see the people who started the sport. And if you go to the track, there's so many different nationalities and races there. And so that's kind of my thing where I was talking about podcasts is where, like, everyone came at me on Twitter like, well, I go to the track and I see everybody all my friends are there and they're all different. You're different people and I like everybody the same. Okay, that's cool. Media is intentional. When you guys got together to do a show, you talked about it amongst yourselves and you said, this is what we're going to do. So from that point on, everything you do is intentional. So my whole point for you and the other 24 people that do podcasts is that you intentionally didn't stop to think, I wonder if there's anyone else I could talk to. And that's kind of the whole thing we're talking about. So I'm back to kind of tell people that we just want to all be together, man. Like,
yeah.
Be together. If we're all together at the track, then friggin' when you do your show, we're all still together. Don't separate us.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's well heard. And yeah, it's a situation where, again, it's insular. It seems like a lot of people only feel comfortable dealing with people whose last names they know or whose stories they know or people that they feel they can relate to. Everybody's at the track for the same reason, and it's because being at the track is one of the greatest places you can be at. And that's one of the things it's one of the reasons JD and I started the show, because we needed something to be really excited about in a time where tracks were closed. I mean, we started this right as shelter in place got rolled out, and it's a situation where I think a lot of podcasts have sprung up sort of for the same reasons. And it's one of those things where I think we all need to take a look in the mirror and realize, hey, wait a minute. There's a lot of underrepresented groups out there with a lot of smart people and a lot of people that love this game.
Yeah, they just, I don't like to necessarily call people out because businesses have their economics, but the folks at NYRA got rid of the individual. And I never met him in my life. I don't know his name, but he did the Spanish speaking part for NYRA. And he interviewed everybody. And I'm like, I remember when I started at TVG, I was like, we should have someone who does that because all the jockeys speak Spanish. And it'd be great if we could talk to them and let them be comfortable. And what I mean by that is when I left TVG, I went to go anchor a morning show in Sacramento. I did Good Day Sacramento, and I also did CBS 13 News, and I did Sports Talk Radio. But one of the best moments that I remember ever on Good Day Sacramento, nobody else cared about it but me and this reporter. We had a reporter who spoke Spanish, and she also spoke English, but she went to go speak with this couple, and on Good Day Sacramento, we would always just kind of do things impromptu, just show up someplace. And she showed up someplace, and there was this older couple that was Latino. And it was so cool because she could see that they were so nervous about speaking English that she quickly switched and started speaking Spanish to them. And man, it's something that really only people that do this job could see. I could see these people just relax. And they started talking to her. And then she translated back. And we're live TV, so we can handle that. We're being cool. And I was just like, man, little things like that just made that couple so comfortable. And that made that segment work. And it's just a small little 3.5 minutes of our 5.5 hour show. But I was like, that was so cool. just the little thing that we did to go the extra step to hire this reporter that speaks, it's multiple, bilingual. And so within horse racing, I can't think of any other place where that's necessary. Horse racing, soccer, and boxing. Maybe the 3 places where you really probably, baseball, where you really want to have a reporter that's bilingual. It would really come in handy. And so they got rid of that. So that's the kind of thing we're talking about, is like they deem certain things not important. And I feel like there could not have been that much that was being taken up in the budget to have that person provide that service to make the most important element of your show, the commodity that you want more than anything, which is the jockey. Because you can't talk to the horse, but you can talk to the jockey and the trainer. If they speak Spanish, that'd be awesome. Now I got to go learn how to speak Spanish. Man, I don't have time for that. It's too late.
I took 6 years of Spanish in school. I remember some, not all. It's not a pretty picture.
I can barely order to drive through a Taco Bell. I cannot speak any Spanish. It's too gone. It's too late for me.
I think the other thing that's interesting with this that we can go into in speaking of a Spanish language and that audience is, okay, when we get track feeds from other countries, we have callers speaking English and getting these feeds from, whether it's in Asia or whether it's from South America, we have callers in that native language. We send our track feeds out in English to the rest of the world. That just seems like a double standard as well to kind of prove the point of it's at all levels. If we really break it down and look at the American racing scene, and I'll say the North American racing scene, I mean, there is an issue with inclusion at, I think, every level that you can look at, whether it's track management, the broadcast side, as you've done such a great job alluding to here, Ken, and then obviously the simulcast feeds. We do things differently than the rest of the world, and we make people conform to our idea of what a race is and what a race call is. It seems like the time to be doing the opposite of that versus letting a valued staff member at NYRA go.
You know, maybe it could be a case of a combination of arrogance and being lazy, because the lazy part comes from the fact that everybody on every continent can speak English. If they can't, they're learning it. So we know, because of everything that we've already done for centuries in this world, we know that reach is pretty far for us. We know that there are so many different countries on different continents. They speak English, but we don't speak their language. So it's much easier for us to export our stuff out than it is for them to import their stuff into us, which is also a whole nother situation. But, you know, I remember when I was given the chance at TVG to take 2 years to go to Barbados and to cover the big race they have there. They have the Sandy Lane Barbados Gold Cup, and it's an awesome event. You know, the horses are, you know, they're nice horses. They're not necessarily horses that can come over here. They're, you know, maybe $100,000 claimers, but still, it's just a great event. And the horsemen are outstanding, and the way they train them is kind of different than what we do here. They do a lot of training out in the ocean with the water, with aquatic training. And so that was really cool to see. And then when the race comes up, it's really just a celebration. Like, the entire community comes out for the Sandy Lane Barbados Gold Cup, and it's just a big party. And it was so fun to see that. But we don't make any money off the wagering of that race here back in the States. So it was kind of like we were kind of losing money by sending me there for 2 years. And I wasn't the only one. We had sent our previous crew there for, I think, the first 3 years. But it was a really great event just to show how horse racing is everywhere. And the culture of it is just so beautiful, and everybody loves it. You know, soccer and horse racing, pretty much every corner of the earth, I think, right?
Sounds right, yeah. And to piggyback off of that point, one organization I do want to give some credit to on this, Gulfstream Park over the past couple of years has instituted the Clásico Caribe at Gulfstream Park. And from what Pete Aiello, a good friend of mine, has told me, that is the loudest day at that track, and it's not even close. And you can hear the enthusiasm in the crowd in some of the race calls. It's really cool. And that's an experience that if we were able to piggyback off of that and able to contribute to that elsewhere, why shouldn't we?
And I should say, Gulfstream Park, they're the one place that have a Spanish simulcast of everything they do. So I
they don't have a choice, right? Like, if you're at Gulfstream Park with a demographic down there, how in the hell are you going to deny those people?
Fair point.
Like, that's impossible. They will burn that place down. Like, they are not messing around. You have to respect that culture down there.
Yeah.
And it's so many different cultures that it's down at Gulfstream in Florida. And that's why it's so beautiful. Like the first time I went to Calder, I had no idea. And then I went to Gulfstream the same year and I was like, what are all these Haitian and Jamaican people doing? This is awesome. What is happening here right now? And I just saw all these different people. There's Cuban people and Puerto Rican. I'm like, this is so cool. What is going on down here? And it was really fun, and it makes it a lot more exciting. I don't know why the families that own the farms and, you know, own the breeding farms and everything, I don't know why they made this decision that they wanted everything to be, I don't know, to be part of their heritage and their legacy. I used to always be weirded out when I would be watching the Keeneland sales because I didn't see, you know, I don't see black people as owners and many trainers, but I see that the person bringing the horse out is black. And I'm like, who's that guy? And everyone's like, oh my God, that guy's amazing. He's been doing that for years. I'm like, okay, he's amazing at that, but you won't give him anything else? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure he loves doing that because it's a great job. But I'm like, why is everybody that's handling everything of color? What is happening with this?
Yeah.
Why is it the person that's got the paddle in the air before they hit the gavel? Why isn't that person of color? What the fuck's happening here?
Yeah.
And it's not strange to anybody else because that's how they've all grown up. But for someone like me that comes in, I'm like, this doesn't seem necessarily right. But that's just, you know, someone will say, well, that's who has the money, Ken. Well, yeah, that goes back to centuries in this country, and you can't fix that. Not your job. It's not my job either.
Yeah.
But when we have cameras, we should just try to do things that show a bit more of what's happening with the sport.
Yep. And going off of one of your points, I saw a tweet and I wish I could remember who wrote it because it was so poignant and it's true about a lot of things in this game. It said something along the lines of horse racing would prefer mediocrity from a section of people within their box rather than excellence from people they're not necessarily familiar with or not necessarily backing or weren't their call as far as who gets over with the audience, who doesn't get over, whatever.
Right.
And that's true on a lot of levels because one of the things you mentioned in your podcast, you go the first floor of a track, that's everybody. That's a wonderful place. You see everybody, you see everything.
It's disgusting, but it's wonderful.
Yes. You go up to the second floor, a little different. You go up to the third floor, like I did at Saratoga every day on the way to the press box. And the only people of color I saw some days were Siena basketball players who were either hosts or waiters or ushers or what have you. And it was, and looking back, yeah, somebody should have said something. And that's where I take a little bit of responsibility for that because someone should have said something. And I was there every day and I didn't say anything. And that's something that looking back on it, I'm like, I've got a medium, I've got a platform. Why didn't I do something with it? And that's something that I'm resolving to do. And that's something that I think a lot of people would be served very well by doing. It's just a matter of listen. And if you see something that's wrong, don't give anybody a free pass.
And even with something like this, you know, I feel like I said before, you guys, you know, you have only so much power and influence, right? You can only control this little box that we're in right now. That's all. And so within this little box that we're in right now, I guess the only challenge that I have, I feel like that people, just everyday people like yourselves can accept is, you know, that there are black people that can handicap. Yeah. You know that there are black trainers, there are black jockeys. Mike, if you're going to have guests on your show, you have to step outside of that and be like, wow, I know there's a guy that I saw at the track that kicks ass. I know there's a guy that I saw at the handicapping tournament, just because it would be more diverse. Because some white people will be like, well, why should I do that? What if he's not a good handicapper? Okay, well then find one that is. Like, they put a tremendous amount of pressure on me because I'm not a good handicapper. And then I'm the only black guy. So then that gives people so many different angles to fuck with me. And I'm like, dude, I'm the best host you've ever seen in your fucking life. There are things that go on in my brain that you have no idea how I'm coming up with that and how I'm getting from this spot to this spot. Like, I'm here for this skill set. I'm not here as a handicapper. I'm learning to handicap, but I'm here for this skill set. Lafitte Pinkai III can't fucking handicap, but he's the best host I've ever seen. He's there for that skill set. That's what we do. Now, it so happens that he has a name and a legacy that goes with it, but that dude's friggin' awesome. Just with his skill set. He's amazing.
Love that guy.
But nobody tells him the fucking handicap. No one's sending him emails because he didn't pick the winner. Nobody's doing that. That's the whole weird thing about people in this whole world. And then we get into this sport. And I've never in my life had a black person send me an email or a message saying, dude, you can't handicap. Not one. We all know I can't. But they would never attack me with that. But every person that does is white, and they use that as some sort of thing to try to bring me down. And I'm like, I'm not here for that. I'm the host.
Yeah.
I lost a commercial break. What is your problem?
It's like you bring up a horse to drive the discussion, and they take that horse that you mentioned and they say, oh, well, that must be his pick. No, that's the controlling speed of the race. That's 20-1. That doesn't have a chance, but it's an important talking point to set up your co-host, and they obviously take liberties with that. And that's why I think the people that have been real TV people that have come on that side of the coin and done what you've done, obviously learning the game as you went, as you knew TV, and they needed people, a mixture as they started that network. And those, Greg Wolf obviously has gone off and done all the stuff with Naira and FS1, and he's doing things in his lane there as a TV guy that's learned racing over time. That's something that we now don't necessarily see with that network. We see people that are kind of float, and that's kind of one of the more interesting things that might be a point of discussion as well, is the host one day is the handicapper the next, and blurring those lines also makes that a little difficult for everybody in relation to Twitter and social media.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing was always, who doesn't want to play the races? Like, who doesn't want to have an opinion and try to play? And so when we were starting the network, it would really frustrate me because, one of my bosses would be like, hey, don't give out picks. I'm like, I'm not trying to give out picks. I'm just trying to be part of the conversation. And so then I wouldn't give out picks. I would just kind of sit back and try to set my analyst up. But the weird thing about this is that an analyst, the worst thing that ever happened to handicappers was putting a camera on them. Because an analyst will get so wrapped up in their opinion and whether that horse wins. And I always felt like that's not your job. And I still tell my friends to this day, I told Matt Carruthers, that guy's awesome. I'm like, your job is not to pick winners. Forget that. Your job is to give out good information. Your job is to do the research and convey everything that you have found and deliver that to the public. Hopefully they have enough sense where they can go, I like that. I'm going to agree with that. Or no, I don't like that. I'm going to stick with my horse. Your job is just to give them the information. Winners are a byproduct of that. If you get a winner, that's great. But for 10, 12 years, all the guy next to me cared about was, did they get a winner? And that's just not good TV. So then that forces me to kind of interject myself into the conversation. Well, what about this other horse? There's 10 other horses in the race, brother, not just your pick. There's 10 others. What about these horses? And then it makes for this whole contentious thing. Then it just didn't work. Whereas now, and I felt it the other day with my partners, they're so open. Where I think somehow everybody figured it out. It's a conversation. Yeah. It's not just me setting you up to give your research. It's us having a conversation. And so now I'll be with Gabby Gaudet, and she's like, Ken, what do you think about this? I'm trying to find the speed. Have you found the speed yet? That's what the fuck we're supposed to be doing, is having a conversation back and forth. Yep. And then hopefully we get to the right horse. That's what the show is. It's called a show, man. That's what the show is all about. So I think that when people do certain things where they try to hold that host down or try to put you in this box, that's just another one of those things that people try to do to control you. And then when you throw race into it, it's a whole nother element where they want to keep you controlled in a particular box, and fuck all that.
Well put. I mean, it's a situation where the more I think about it, the more, wait a minute. Yeah, putting a camera on a handicapper and giving them an audience and giving them an incentive to pick winners, because the average person that's watching the race, they've got their opinions. They're looking for complimentary information. And you know what? If I've got a 20-1 shot that we're going through and that horse runs well, finishes second or third, if that horse completes an exacta or a trifecta for somebody out there, I've done my job. Exactly. And that's something that I wish more people would get.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things where human beings are always going to internalize things, and then their desires become far more important than the objective. That's always going to happen. If you got workers in a factory, there's going to be one person on that assembly line that thinks they should get more money than everybody else, always, whether they're doing more work or not. That's just human nature. So then when you throw the camera into the mix, man, it just throws everything upside down. And I've always felt like certain things, if you watch television and the network coverage, NBC, they do the big shows. ESPN used to do them, but now it's NBC. And they bring in some of their talent from their network roster, and everyone that they bring in is always white. And I'm like, you mean to tell me in your entire network you never thought that there's anybody black that could do this? And so therefore, it becomes a situation where when I was the only black person there, everyone's like, well, they should be using you. I'm like, why? Because I'm the only black person out here? Like, then that puts a whole bunch of pressure on me. Now I got to be super Negro. I got to be all things to everybody. You know, it's just, if you have so many more of us, then it doesn't really matter who gets that gig, because somebody will eventually get there and it'll be diversity. If you only got one, what kind of a chance does that one person have? And you're putting too much pressure on that one person to be that guy. So just go get a bunch of other people. It isn't that hard.
Duly noted. Yeah, absolutely. JD, you got anything to add?
No, I think Ken set the scene right there, and you know, we look at these big broadcast days, and you know, one thing that NBC does a little bit, I don't want to turn the, you know, completely slam fest, is, I mean, for days like the Kentucky Derby, they show the red carpet and there's a good mix of people and they interview people that are there as fans. But again, the handicapping, the serious information side, you know, that could be better, but that could be better industry wide. And
Right.
I feel like I'm in a tough position because I've got two people that, someone who was on air at certain points of TVG, and obviously, Ken, you're there now. So I'm kind of the middleman here, just listening to you guys, because you guys have been there under the lights and done it, whereas I've done it in other mediums, just not in horse racing. So just trying to
Right. No,
figure
I
out
hear
how
you.
to weave around things here.
Yeah, the thing about horse racing, which is so weird, is the people they interview on the red carpet for the Derby, those are all successful black athletes and music artists and actors. That's different. So, but when they choose to go get Johnny Weir or Tara Lipinski or whoever they choose to go do the crazy color part, I'm like, okay, you could have picked somebody else to do that. Or with all the people that you have lined up, you could have found just some different flavor, different anything. You could have injected some culture into that at any point that you wanted to. They're spending millions of dollars on that for production. And you don't want to show just how great it is for everybody. It's not that hard. So it's just one of those things where I'm like, we could be quite a bit better. And it's just a little moves they could make, little adjustments, little tweaks, just to make it look better. That's all. It just looks better, man, when there's more of us involved and there's everybody out there. And then you're showing that person that's sitting at home, whether that black person, that you're showing them, okay, there is a space for you. We see you. Like, we see that you're part of this whole community and this whole culture. And we're not just going to show you because, you know, there's riots in the street, so we kind of have to now. Like, they do the weirdest things and they don't even see it. Like the celebration with Tiz the Law. That's Saratoga.
Yeah.
There's 25 white people on that bus. Do you know what happened to a bus with 25 black people on it? That motherfucker would be on fire. It's like, but I'm like, you got friends, you got 25 friends, and you don't know any black people that would want to be a part of this ownership with you. You got 25 of them. Like, but when they tell the story, they're like, we're just, you know, average guys. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you are. You worked hard. I'm not denying you that. But man, it just makes our sport look so bad when you got 25 friends, and in that 25 friend circle, you don't have any black people in your circle. It just makes us all look like we're completely just separated at all times. And we're not, especially in this sport.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because one thing I will say that I saw on Twitter today is they announced the class of 2020 for the Godolphin Flying Start program. Now, I'm not knocking the Godolphin Flying Start program. That's produced a fair amount of incredibly talented people. 12 white kids. And it's jarring. It looks like a fashion catalog that I want no part of. It's scary stuff. And you're telling me out of the applications that you got out of the entire world, because they pull people from the United States, from Australia, from Europe, everywhere. You're telling me you couldn't find one black person, one person of color, one anything? It's weird, and it should not be this hard. And I feel like that's something we keep coming back to is it's not like we're asking for revolutionary changes here. We're not asking for the Kentucky Derby to stop playing My Old Kentucky Home or anything like that.
No.
Which, by the way, I personally would be all for, but that's a different story. We're asking for representation of a demographic that's underrepresented. And it's a shame that it took everything that it took for a lot of people to sit up and recognize the systemic racism that's involved. And it's a shame some people still don't want to recognize that.
You know, and it extends itself to this. Here's the way I see it. It's kind of weird. There are a lot of podcasts out there and a lot of shows out there. But I try to just say things and be just quick about it and don't try to worry about the impact, because I know people are going to think that I'm full of myself, and I'm not at all. I just have confidence. That's a difference. But I'm still me. I'm still Ken Rudulph, and I'm still a guy that was an important part of the first 12 years of TVG. I'm still a guy that's had 25 years of network experience, TV, movies, blah, 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 right? So when I come back and I'm doing this podcast and I bring in my first guests are Bob Baffert, Mike Smith. Then I get this guy his name is Steve Gorman. He's the former drummer of my all-time favorite band, the Black Crowes. Then I go get these two former NBA players that their first jobs were at the track and they love horse racing. So I bring these people from outside of horse racing to horse racing. Nobody gave two fucks about my podcast. I do 4 episodes on race, and now everybody's like, well, okay, we need to pay attention to this. And that's another trap that we get into, that you only listen to black people when we're talking about race. But I was talking about rock music 4 episodes ago. What the fuck? I brought in a millionaire from the NBA who grew up at the track, who loves horse racing. Nobody listened. I talked to Bob Baffert. Nobody listened. I talked to Mike Smith. Nobody listened. So it's just a whole mentality that we have where people only listen to someone like me when I'm talking about black stuff. But then they say, why do you talk about black stuff? Well, motherfucker, you didn't care about me until I said this. I was just doing regular good shows. My conversation with Steve Gorman of the Black Crowes is awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a great story with Doug Christie, the NBA All-Star, who first job was cleaning up at the track. It's like, there are great stories and no one cares. So my thing is this, we're not equal with each other, because when you guys see me, you don't see me as a person. You're like, well, he's only good for black stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm good for everything. Everything. I know more about your music than you do. Like, I know more about stuff within white culture than you do. And I know my culture. Like, I'm here for everything. But no one pays attention to black people until some shit goes down. That's what I'm talking about. You feel me, man?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm just a dude here trying to fucking do the races with you at the same time. But no one's paying attention until some shit goes down. That's what I'm trying to avoid too.
Yeah. No, and that's well stated.
By the way, you guys, see, the reason why I'm here talking to you guys, I don't know if you got a Klan hood in your fucking closet or not, but I can look into your eyes and I can feel your heart, and I'm like, these guys are okay. Like, I don't think, it's not my job to give every white person a pass, but it is my job to be like, okay, is that person all right? Do I feel like I can talk to them and they understand where I'm coming from and they don't get offended, and I'm not going to be offended by them? And that's what it's all about. So I chose you guys. I'm like, these guys are all right. These guys are okay. You're trying. You did a 50-point plan for horse racing, Andrew. So you did a 50-point plan. And I was like, this person sat down and thought a lot about this. And I liked a lot of the points that you brought up because they were really, really well thought out and researched. And then you got to 49 and 50. And you kind of covered diversity, and I appreciated that. But I felt like that was a great example of somebody who sat down and thought about some really great points that could really help move racing forward and really help the customer feel more protected and respected as a player. But then you didn't go all the way to say Black people and Mexican people and Asian people and women, and you didn't make a point to specify the things that we want to do to make everyone feel included. Why not?
I whiffed.
No, man, you didn't whiff because you thought about 50 points.
On this, I tiptoed.
Were you afraid?
It wasn't necessarily that. It was an instance where the thing that preceded that, and I'll give a little backstory here before I dive in. I got in a discussion/argument about the association of Barstool Sports with horse racing.
Got it.
And you don't have to be a genius to see that the head of Barstool Sports, whose name I'm not going to glorify, has been in a lot of situations where his beliefs have been, to put it very mildly, exposed.
Right.
There's a story out there, JD, you mentioned this, you brought it to my attention. There's a story in Variety magazine where the guy brags about being, and I'm quoting him on this, uncancelable. And the photo they used, Ken, was a picture of him on the red carpet at the Pegasus World Cup. What does that tell you? Yeah. We need to not be associated with this person. And it was an instance where, yeah, diversity was on my mind. Being able to put underrepresented people in place was on my mind. I just didn't go far enough with it. And that's what I meant when I said that I whiffed. And given what we found out, especially over the last week, but things we already knew, I could have and should have done more. And that's one of the things that I'm learning in the fact that, yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate. I don't want to use the word lucky. I think lucky's a loaded term. I've been incredibly fortunate to do a lot of things in this business. I've been fortunate to do a lot of things that I'm pretty proud of, things not a lot of people been able to do. A couple of years ago at this place back here, I beat everybody in terms of winners over the course of a 40-day meet. Not something that a lot of people are doing.
That's incredible.
Thank you. But there's stuff that I could have done better. There's stuff where I look back and I say, I should have done more. And it's one of those cases where when good-hearted people don't say anything, we wind up in situations where even the good-hearted people wind up being in the way of progress. And inadvertently, that's what happened there. And it's a case where looking back, I wish I had done more.
You know, but I didn't mean for you to say that. I don't think you need to apologize for anything.
No, it's okay.
I just feel like, moving forward, we're like, okay, I always try to find out what happens with a situation like that where, and it's not about you as an individual. A lot of people would do the same thing where they would come with a plan to help with racing. And then something that's just as small as that, like, oh yeah, let's be a little bit more inclusive. Let's just open it up and try to, because most people don't think that there's a problem. Like I said in my podcast, just because you open the door and say, come in, doesn't mean that everyone is welcome. There's a different thing you have to do to make people feel welcome once they come inside.
Yeah.
And I think horse racing can do a little bit of that. And I often think about things like, why would people, and whatever problems this person had with his finances is not my business, but why would someone like MC Hammer buy horses, come into racing, win graded stakes, and then disappear like that?
Yeah.
Like things like that. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why'd that guy leave so quickly?
Mm-hmm.
He spent a lot of money when he came in here.
Yeah, there's a photo that Barbara Livingston took of a shirtless MC Hammer in a packed grandstand at Belmont Park, and I love that photo. Love a lot of things Barbara does, but that's probably my favorite Barbara Livingston photo, and it doesn't have a single horse in the photo.
Right? It's just a bunch of people.
Yeah, and they're pumped. I mean, that's the enthusiasm that we're trying to go for. We all love this game. We all want to see this game not just survive. We want to see it thrive. And the more tight we get and the less inclusive that we get, the lesser the chances are of that happening.
Like a thing I think about is is the one thing you can make money at in horse racing is breeding. That's what everyone's trying to do. You try to get your horse to the track if you're lucky, and then you get just a couple of starts and wins, and then you get that thing to the breeding shed because that's where you get paid. Now, with all of the millionaire athletes that came through the University of Kentucky, and this is about investing in a future, how have, I don't want to say none, but how aren't there more of those guys that would invest in horse racing? Because that's an investment that can accrue and just really be quite fruitful later on in life.
Yeah.
That's one of those things. I'm like, okay, is someone not telling these athletes this? Or do they not feel welcome or comfortable, or do they not trust the people in the industry?
Yeah.
Now,
I know. I don't mean to interrupt, but I know Rick did tell the story of when he was at Kentucky, he would take his team to Claiborne Farm a couple of times a year, and he would always tell the story of pointing out Mr. Prospector close by, and then Big Red would come rolling by, and just you could tell, even at his advanced age, Secretariat was Secretariat, and he marveled at the effect that it had on the kids that he brought to the farm. Yeah. And I really do think it's a case where horse racing's not doing enough. And it goes back to the minute one of this discussion. It's the fact that racing's not doing enough to make black people feel welcome.
That's my point. Like, because I think the UK basketball team goes to Keeneland every year, right?
I know Calipari does. Calipari and Todd Schrupp, I know, are pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like there have been players that have come there, and I've talked to a couple of guys on the Sacramento Kings who came from University of Kentucky, but I never had a chance to ask them about their experience when they went to Keeneland, because I think every one of them has to go there at some point during the season. So that's one of those things where I was like, well, why don't those guys invest in that? And it may just be a situation where you just want to make them feel a bit more comfortable. And maybe they don't when you see how, not what the sport looks like, but also how it's run. Like, we don't have a governing body. So it's just going to be really difficult for anything to change in our sport. And I remember when I first worked at TVG, and every year, every couple of years when we had a runner that won the first two legs of the Triple Crown, and everyone's like, oh my God, it'd just be so great if we have a Triple Crown, then we'll get media coverage. And I always said, you don't want that. You do not want the mainstream media to come here and look at us. You don't. You think you do, but you don't. Because when they come here and start looking at what we do every single day, they're not going to be cool. And that's what happened when we got around to the situation with the really horrible run that we had at Santa Anita with all of the horses. That just gave mainstream media the window, because they don't like horse racing anyway. That just gave them the window to be like, that's what we're talking about. That's the problem right there.
And then they gave PETA a seat at the table. I realize that's another discussion for another time.
You're right.
They gave PETA a seat at the table. What? If someone is trying to kill your organization, you don't give them a position of power.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that, and I don't know anything behind that. I can't even comment because I don't know. But I understand what you're saying, because that entity only appears to be interested in removing, eradicating, erasing this industry, not trying to help it, not reform, but just go away. And that's not cool. You're right. If that's what they're trying to do, that's not cool.
No, not at all whatsoever. JD, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, I've been doing a lot of listening on this podcast, and I appreciate the words on both sides, and I think the one point I want to mention is I do think there are outlets like the Thoroughbred Daily News, and they have their diversity in racing series, and they've covered some great topics. Dora Delgado this week wrote a nice story about how she got in there. She's obviously the executive VP at the Breeders' Cup. She worked her way up from executive assistant to that, and she's worked her butt off and done a great job. But they gave her 3,000 words. I mean, this lady needs 30,000 words. This lady needs a story. This lady needs a book. This lady needs something more to show what she overcame to get where she is in the industry. And I feel like there are stories there that are just not being told. And if we've got to figure out a way to tell those stories, I'm all for it. But if not us, somebody has to, because I think there are stories that help with the process and show that it can be done It's just spotlighting these people in a comfortable way for them, because we don't want to put all the pressure on them. You mentioned that, Ken. You don't want to, in certain cases in the past, you've been the black guy, and that's a tough spot for you to be in. And what we need to do is spotlight these people, but don't say, okay, this is the black jockey. It's like, hey, this is one of the best black jockeys out there, and here's his story. Position it and get the stories out there. I think they're great stories, and they just need to be told.
Or you can just say he's one of the best jockeys.
Correct.
Deshaun Parker kicks ass.
Yes.
Everywhere he goes.
Jockey, period. And so I think that I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate that. I'd like to tweak it just a little bit by just saying, just by interviewing people and bringing them on, it doesn't matter. Only you, as the person who is conscious of the media that you are presenting, knows this person's black and I want to bring them in. But for the purposes of your show and for your viewers, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But for you, because everything we do is intentional, right? We plan our shows a week in advance at least. You're like, you know what? There's a guy that I saw, that dude is pretty good. Or I just happened to be on Twitter, and I found like these 6 people, and I'm like, you guys are friggin' incredible. You're picking winners every single tweet. What the fuck? How'd you know this? It's a black guy from Jamaica. It's a black guy from Chicago. It's a black guy from Florida. It's a black lady from Jamaica. I'm like, what? How did you get all this knowledge? I don't even know how you figured this out, but you're picking winner after winner after winner. And they're just, for lack of a better term, they're just everybody. They're just everyday people. They're not special in a sense of, they're not on TV. They just have their job. And then they go home and they handicap. And then they sit there and laugh at me and Carruthers and Schrupp and Simon Bray like, you motherfuckers don't know shit. Winner, 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 winner. While we're all getting 6 figures to sit up there like a bunch of idiots. And these people who are at home crush us every day. And so my whole thing was like, there's a whole bank of like black people that are crushing us on a daily basis with their knowledge, and nobody knows them. And so there was a guy, he was in a handicapping tournament. I want to say his name was Herman Miller or Harold Miller or something in that nature. And it was a long time ago. And I remember feeling that brother was a really good handicapper, but I remember watching him at the tournament, and he was the only black player that I saw there. And I was like, we got to just open this up. There are plenty of other players out there. I don't know why they don't feel maybe comfortable or whatever, or to come forward, or maybe there's some sort of parameters or criteria that they're not, fitting. But it just, it's not really that big of a deal. Just open it up. There's plenty of women out there that can play. There's Asian people that can play. There's Mexican people that crush every freaking night. Like, there's so many people out there that play. But I guess my whole point was that, just try to find a way to bring them all in.
Yeah.
Into the show and just try to mix your guests up. That's all we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think the key point, Ken, is since we've started doing this, we've gone down our friend Rolodex, and you're really the first person that we've had that's affiliated with a lot of our friends, but the first person outside of that friend Rolodex. So we need to do a better job, finding the people and giving them a chance on this show to talk about what they want to talk about, cover the races they want to talk about, and give them a chance to show how little myself and Andrew know about handicapping. At least, Andrew does a good job. At least how little I know about handicapping. Let's say that.
Like, it'd be better, because doesn't it get boring talking to friggin' handicappers that are already on friggin' TV already? Or if you get a trainer or somebody, what the fuck are they going to say to you? Nothing. Trainer's not going to give you any information. So the handicappers are fun because they're crazy.
I tried to tell Jonathan Wong where to spot a horse. That was pretty fun a couple of weeks ago. It didn't go well.
Oh,
really?
Man.
It was jokingly, but yes.
Hey, wait a minute. So, Andrew, I know you got a bunch of scores. JD, have you had a score yet at the track at all? You got a story?
Oh, I've got a lot of them.
You have? Okay, good.
I just don't have them on this show. That's kind of the joke and running joke of this show is Andrew gives out tickets on the show that win, and I give out 3 of 4s that are hilarious, because I had a big 3 of 4 at Oaklawn one of the first weeks of the podcast, and I singled in the final race, and I singled a 15-1 shot, and that 15-1 shot was home, just absolutely home, and past the horse, and then the horse on the rail that led the whole way just came back and just got up by a nose. It was $2,500, and I looked like the biggest genius in the world for about 15 seconds, and then went down. My best story recently is it was actually at Colonial Downs. I love that place, and I'm glad that they're running again. Last year, it was a great meet. I put in, usually when I put in a ticket, I'm locked and loaded, but
Right.
I've got a now 3-year-old, 2-year-old at that time. Sometimes things happen.
True.
So I get back and I put in like a $12 ticket, and I realize I'm alive in the last leg. And that's the leg where I have just a whole bunch of long shots. And I start looking at the wheel pace here, and it's like, I've got a chance. Let me figure out a way. And I'm sitting here, and I realize, there's 2 minutes to post. And I'm like, okay, well, if I really like these horses, I need to get some win bets on them, so on and so forth. I'm like furiously punching. I'm in Arizona. I have to literally punch all my bets in on a phone. So I get shut out. I get a 60-1 shot home. $8,000 score, and I was trying to put 100 to win on the horse.
But you got the pick 5 though, right?
Yeah, I got the I got the ticket,
Okay.
but I would have like doubled my money for nothing if I could just operate a phone more quickly.
Right.
Like any horse player, JD is very, very greedy. Greed is a must when you're a horse player.
No, you know that. If you're hot, man, you got to maximize. You know that, Andrew. If it's a day when your handicapping is on and you know it, there's some times when we just know this is my shit today. I know it. You can feel it. You get 3 races in, you're like, okay, you got to maximize because tomorrow you're going to get crushed if you don't hit this today.
Yeah, for sure.
Anything that I've ever hit, I've never hit anything on a big ticket. I've hit the pick 6 like 4 times. I've hit pick 5s. They've all been on tickets $36 or less. And like there was a day where I hit a pick 5 last year for the Rebel at Oaklawn. And it was when Long Range Toddy beat
Improbable.
Yes, Improbable. Thank you. And in that ticket, people forget that pick 5 began with Midnight Bisou, the single. Then I go from there and I love John Court, so I got a win wager on Long Range Toddy, and I use 2 horses in that leg. I use Omaha Beach, and then we get to the last leg. And at the last second, I remember, I'm like, this Steve Asmussen, he's got a horse that I love, but he's also got a first-time starter that doesn't make any sense to me. I better use him anyway. So I use that first-time starter anyway, and that's the horse that comes up the inside. And that helps this pick 5 pay $28,000 on a $36 ticket. And it's one of those things that I think all players know that you've got a feeling. You can't just go off your handicapping. There's always something that's happening in the air that's going to be telling you, hey, man, use that horse. Hey, man, don't forget about that horse. And it happened today where I was playing a pick 5 at Canterbury, and I felt like this inside horse might beat me, but I was like, nah, fuck him. What happens? And I'm watching it live, and I can see it happening. I've got the 8 horse and the inside horse, and there's a battle. I'm like, I know I'm not going to win this photo. Boom! Inside horse gets me at 17-1. I'm like, and I knew the whole time I should have added that horse. I didn't watch the rest of the sequence. I have no idea what happened. But
I had that horse and then lost in the very next leg, Ken. So don't feel bad about it.
I've done that like a million times.
Yeah. The thing I'll say on my Colonial score there is, and I don't know what made this. I handicapped that, and I had a $12 ticket for 50 cents. So I said, okay, I'm going to play it twice, and that's why it came for 8. It came for 4 twice.
Yeah.
I mean that's the big scores for me. It's always the small tickets.
The best big score story I have isn't my score. It's my dad's score. And it's fitting because my dad's flying out here. We're filming this Wednesday night. He's flying out to the Bay Area tomorrow. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff together. It's going to be fun. You're going to be able to see some videos on Twitter this week. We're going to go through a couple of races because there's nothing else we can do in the Bay Area. Everything else is closed.
Right.
So he loves playing Remington Park, and so do I. Remington Park has a lot of really big fields, but the pick 4 pools don't necessarily match the win odds because it's a smaller pool and there's not a lot of combinations that are covered.
Right.
Closing night at Remington Park, I forget whether it was last year, the year before, whatever. He hits a 4-1, a couple of 8 or 9-1s, and a 6-1. Now, the 9-1 horses, those are $20 to win. It's not exactly like they're cheap horses.
Yeah.
He puts forth the $24 ticket and gets back 10 grand. with horses that are not at any way, shape, or form outrageous prices.
Yeah.
If you get 10 horse field, 12 horse field, 12 horse field, 12 horse field, you're beating favorites. You're getting fifth and sixth choices coming in. And that's where you get the value. And that's one of the things that I preach on here. And that's one of the things that's actually gotten me a couple of pretty nice scores is you don't necessarily need the 50 to 1s, the 60 to 1s, whatever. They obviously help. I am not disparaging anyone who likes a 50 to 1, a 60 to 1, whatever. My story from a couple of years ago, not a couple of years ago, it was 8 years ago. I'm really, really old at this point. I was covering the Travers in 2012. Rick Dutrow Jr. brings back Willie Beeman.
Tricky Rick.
Off of 3 days rest.
He did that all the time, though.
Rick Dutrow was not allowed on the grounds at Saratoga. Wins the King's Bishop at 11 to 1. I liked Golden Ticket in the Travers. I am convinced, you will never convince me otherwise, ever. I am convinced Golden Ticket gets his nose down on the wire. And the photo in the Saratoga special the next day, which was taken, I guess, just before the official photo, you see Golden Ticket's nose is ahead. I had Alpha on the ticket too. Hit it a couple of times. That would have been a $4,000 score for a struggling turf rider making $25,000 a year plus overtime in upstate New York. I still remember that. Golden Ticket will always have a place in my heart for that. And even better, I actually won a New York State AP award for the digital coverage that I did that day. So that was pretty cool. Yeah. But it just goes to show everybody in this game has a story. And if their story is somewhat different from yours, listen and learn. And I think that's ultimately what we can take from a lot of the stuff that's been going on. And that's a commitment that I'm going to make. I'm going to listen, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to call things out when I see them. I called out the flying start thing earlier, and I'm not trying to get points. It's a situation where, again, we all want the game to thrive. And if we can see a way where we can do that just by speaking up and saying, something doesn't look right here, I think we've got a duty to do that.
All right, let's do it together then.
You betcha. Ken, really quick before we sign off, you've got your Twitter handle down there, but where else can people follow you? Tell a little bit about your podcast, a little bit about some other things that you're doing.
Oh, wow. So obviously I'm on TVG. I try to get in here 4 days a week, sometimes 5 if I'm in town. And obviously I've shut down travel for my other jobs now, so I'm here for the majority of the time. I do the podcast on Believe Podcast Network. It's called Believe in Horse Racing. The entire concept was just to share the excitement of horse racing and to bring people who are not in horse racing, bring people from outside into it, to share it with all of us to try to grow our sport. That's about it. I don't do music anymore, so that's not really something that we talk about. So I'm just doing the podcast and taking care of my son and my family and doing TVG and waiting for stuff to open up.
Yeah, for sure. They just closed a whole bunch of stuff up here in Contra Costa County, as mentioned. I'm not a Sacramento guy. I'm a Concord guy, about an hour away from your stomping ground. So been up there a couple of times, been at the Sacramento State Fair. That's always a lot of fun.
JD will tell you there's no reason to stay there. No reason.
I was going to say, I think there's a reason JD's in Arizona with his purple couch.
Well, I mean, Sacramento Kings. I mean, come on.
That's right. So wait a minute. You're in Arizona. You're still a Kings fan, right?
Of course.
Start no shit with me. All right. Even though I'm mad at the organization, that's still my team.
Yeah. No, it's been an interesting ride as a Kings fan. Way back when they came from Kansas City / Omaha, which is one of the weirder stories in NBA history, but we don't have time for that on this podcast.
Yeah. We don't have time for any Tim Donaghy references, I don't think.
Man, no one understands. That's
yeah.
All we need is that one championship. That's all we need. We don't need 16 like the Lakers. We just needed one. It changes our whole everything.
Yep.
Whole trajectory if we get that one.
I'm a Michigan fan, yeah. I was rooting for Chris Webber. I get it. Dude was an immensely talented power forward, had a bunch of chances. Oh, boy. Well, anyway, Ken, thank you so much for coming on.
I am too.
Thank you so much for taking the time, man. We really appreciate it. We really value the discussion that we were able to have. And best of luck moving forward, everything you're doing, the podcast, TVG, everything else. And just thank you. We really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you guys for actually just listening. It's really hard to just listen to somebody talk sometimes. And so I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Let's keep it moving forward together.
Amen. Amen. JD, would you like to handle the catchphrase this week since I was able to work in a crack about your purple couch?
Yeah, I will do that. So as we say every week here, and this started in the midst of the COVID crisis, Ken, we just have simple words. And thankfully, I think Gavin Newsom has helped us this week with this one. Stay off the beaches. Have a good night,
week, everybody.